Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of Getting Down to Business. I'm Ashley Curtis, Assistant Program Director for the Bishop Center for Ethical Leadership.
And I'm Jill Brown, Academic and Career Advisor with the Movement College of Business. And we have a new team member on our set today.
Ooh.
And we're just going to get to know Andres a little more and what he is bringing to our campus, to our students in the career sector.
Yeah. But before we dive in and get down to business, like all of our other episodes, we're going to start with a quick 5-second game. So, Andres, here's how it's going to work. I'm going to pull a deck from this card. I'm going to read you the question. You have to give 3 answers.
3 answers.
The minute you start responding, Jill will flip over the timer, and that's when your 5-second countdown begins.
Oh.
Yeah. So
Okay.
only 5
No
seconds.
pressure.
No pressure.
Okay.
Well, you'll have an opportunity to ask us a question too.
Yes.
Okay.
But we get to
Fantastic.
tag team it. We need 2 hits.
All right. Gotta
Okay.
pick a good one.
The suspense.
This is great. All right. Ready? Name 3 things you do while no one is looking.
Oh my God. Singing and sometimes in the shower. That was really fast. 3 things I don't do or I do when no one's looking.
Would you
Yeah.
like to add to that list even though the
No.
time is up? Just
No.
singing.
Just singing.
Just
Okay.
singing.
All right.
No.
All right.
All right.
I'll do the timer for us too.
Okay.
And that way,
Yeah.
you
That
pick
works.
us a doozy.
All right.
Not soccer teams, not.
We're not good at soccer.
I mean, we love our Rowdies. Go Rowdies.
Okay.
What was the other one? Shakespearean works.
Are you both tag teaming this?
Yes.
one?
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Name 3 men's magazines.
Men's Health.
Forbes. Time.
Is Forbes and Times only for men?
I was going to say, why are those gender
They're
specific?
gender neutral, but they can be for men. That was
Although that is a very
specific.
interesting
All right.
and leads for a good conversation.
That's how
Yeah.
we're going to play that game. Anyway.
Oh, okay.
I think those are fails on both sides. No,
Yeah.
that's all right. That's all right.
It was not our best. Anyway.
It's okay.
So, Andres, we're really excited to welcome you.
I'm happy to
You
be here.
are the career counselor
Mhm.
in the K. Tiedemann School of Business and Finance. Why don't you just give us a little bit of information on yourself and tell our listeners who you are?
So again, my name is Andres Cintrón, Career Counselor, Internship Coordinator for my College of Business here at the K. Tiedemann School of Business and Finance. I originally, I've stepped into this role since it's been about a month and a couple change, something like that.
Yeah.
Since April 26th. So it's been fantastic so far. I've enjoyed it. But previous to that, I've worked in higher education for a little bit under about 7 to 8 years. I really started off my career working in academic affairs as an academic success coach, helping students that were primarily in probation, really getting them the necessary skills to be successful in college. As I was working there at Central Connecticut State University, I started working on my master's program in counseling. So my background is that's really where I feel the most at home with the counseling. But from there, I went on to various roles in higher education. One of the things that I really pride myself in the work that I've done is being able to support students in a variety of different ways. I've had the opportunity of working in residence life and understanding the needs of students when they're living on campus, because I
There's
never
no
lived on
stress.
campus.
No stress
Oh,
when you
no.
live on campus. None.
Absolutely. And I didn't have that luxury of living on campus. It was really nice to kind of get to see that world and what is that like and how do I support students in that perspective.
You didn't live on
Um,
campus, huh? Did you,
yeah.
Ashley? Out of curiosity.
I did.
I did
Yeah.
too.
I did for my first 2 years.
I did for 1 year, and that was
Yeah.
plenty. That was plenty.
Yeah, no, I was a commuter student.
Okay.
And I didn't go to college until I was 21.
Okay.
And I did that on purpose because my family, I wanted to go in as an independent student. I really didn't have the support from my family. And so I was, first generation college student. And so it was really important for me to figure that out. And I did, and it wasn't easy.
No, but that's a
but-
nice perspective that you also offer students that are trying to figure it out and may or may not
Absolutely.
students, and we see this, I don't mean to interrupt, but
Oh, no,
as
no.
you go along
I
your
want this to be a
story,
conversation. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah, absolutely.
a lot of times when I'm talking with students about their major, and do you
hmm
have anyone in your family working in a finance or
Yeah.
accounting field maybe, and they're like, no, my dad's a farmer, my mom works
Yeah.
here, and it's been a plethora, and so having your exposure
Yeah.
and figuring out along the way, but we're here to help them.
Yeah,
That's part of it.
absolutely.
So go back to
Absolutely.
your story. Yeah.
No, that's fantastic. I love the adding to the story. But and then from there on, I worked in different areas and as an adjunct faculty. I was teaching at Nichols College. I prepared and created my own Spanish course. I created a course in Puerto Rico, which was very close to my heart.
That's
From
right. So bilingual
yeah,
or
yeah.
more trilingual.
I wish I took Japanese. I went
Okay.
to Japan. I did a study abroad trip in Japan. And when I was there, I felt so proud of myself. And now that I think about it, I'm like, oh man, I wish that I continued
If
it.
you would have kept it up, yeah.
Yeah, no.
But students have that opportunity to speak
Yep,
in their native tongue for
absolutely.
that.
Yeah, so I did that. And then from there on, I went into first year experience courses. I was teaching first year experience at University of Tampa, doing programming. I've done a lot of work with different offices, career services, diversity, DI work. Um, and then now I'm here. So I'm doing career counseling, and I love. But yeah, so that's a little bit about my career background, I guess I could
Okay.
say.
I want to ask, of course, like so far,
Yeah.
and obviously the journey is far from, even hitting
Just
the
getting
peak.
going.
Yeah, exactly. What's been some of maybe your favorite pieces of programming, and
Yeah.
what you're excited to bring to our campus?
I think for me, and what excites me about working in higher education is just really connecting with students and being that support. We mentioned a little bit about being a first-gen student. Not having that support. It's a really,
Hmm.
For first-generation college students, and in a way, it's a feeling of at a disadvantage because we don't have that support from someone who their
Has
family
done
went to
it.
college. They've done it, right?
Yeah.
But for me, what really brings me a lot of joy in this work is feeling like I am able to help students, right? Like I'm able to give them the tools that they need to be successful, and I can help them, guide them, and mentor them, right? It's really important for me not to also feel that I'm, doing it for them either, because I want them to feel like they're gaining the skills, the necessary skills for them to also do it for themselves and
Mhm.
say, I can do this, right?
Right.
Because it can be a very scary process going through college, but that's what really brings me the most joy. And so anything that I do, whether it's programming, making sure that I am giving them something that they can
Hmm.
gain knowledge from, that is the skills or tools that they can utilize, and then apply them. That's
Right.
really, really important for me.
It's crazy to think, though. You would think along the lines, technology, everything that's
Yeah.
come about,
Yeah.
things would get a little easier.
Yeah.
But actually, I think trying to figure it out, it's almost a bigger world. It's more convoluted.
Yeah.
There are definitely different pathways, and like you went later in life to college. Some students do that,
Yeah.
or they have jobs or other things, military service, travel, whatever it might be. But
Yeah. And I think every generation is going to be a little bit different, right? We
Mhm.
think of this generation of being the technology generation,
Mhm.
right? And so, in my experience, when I was at University of Tampa and speaking with the students and first year experience program, we would teach them about all the tools that were available and the softwares and all these kind of things. And I'm talking to students and thinking, well, don't you know how to do this already? You should already know how to do this, aren't you?
Right.
And their response to you, no, I don't know how
Right.
to use either it's Adobe or it's Microsoft Office systems, right? Because their ideology of technology is completely different than what
Right.
we're thinking.
It's more
right?
entertainment.
It's
to
really more
me.
entertainment. It's more of these other things, right?
Mhm.
Do they have the capacity? Absolutely, right? Because they're quick to learn all these kind of things. But thinking about it from that perspective, when we talk
Mhm.
about technology, is it accessible for everybody, and what does that mean, right? But
Yeah.
yeah,
I'm curious as, talking about students and you're starting to give us an idea, but for students who are wondering what it's like to work with you and
Oh,
your coaching philosophy, if you will. So let's say I were a student and I were to come sit down in your office and say, Andres, I need help with finding an internship or whatever it may be. What's kind of your approach into how you work with students?
yeah. I don't really feel like I have a very specific approach. For me, it's really important that I want to get to know who you are. So maybe we can, call that. There's so many different approaches to counseling and coaching. Maybe it's a holistic approach that I kind of incorporate a lot of different elements. But for me, it's really important to get to know who you are. I had an appointment yesterday and with one of the students, and first thing I'm doing is telling her about me, who I am, asking them who are you, what led you to where you are right now, what has brought you, what are your interests and all those kind of things. It's really important for me to know, build that rapport, because I don't want this to be a transactional. I don't
Hmm.
want them to be just come to me because they are in need of
I need
something
this. I need that.
and I need to review my resume or I need this, or if it's advising or those kind of things. But I really want you to get to know me and I want to get to know you. Right. And then through that interaction is then we start figuring out, based on what they're saying to me, how I can best help them, right? And what techniques and tools that I might have in my brain that I might say, okay, my experience, this would probably help for this student, right? Maybe we're talking about doing different assessments, or we're talking about the grow model or grit, or talking about growth mindset, right? All these kind of things that we kind of do that sometimes we don't think that we're doing it, but we are doing those. And then really kind of work that way for the student. What's going to fit that student best, rather than me automatically assuming that I need to take this approach with that student, right? If that
Yeah.
kind of makes any
Yeah.
sense. So that's for me how I would work for you. So I'm gonna want to get to know you, Ashley, and be like, yo, talk to me about you. Where you from? What brought you to this?
I love it.
It's important.
Building relationships.
Yeah.
Yeah. And also knowing that it's not just one stop, come in. We really want to get to know you
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
also help you along that journey, because if we can catch you early enough,
Absolutely.
then we're able to help you with, maybe you start with some job shadowing or
Mhm.
informational interviews, and then it progresses to maybe a summer internship.
Yeah.
And then the next semester, it's this final internship before you graduate, maybe with a company that you really want to hopefully bridge after
Mhm.
graduation into a full-time career. So,
And that's the key. The thing is really trying to get the students as early as possible,
yeah,
right? Because a lot of the students want to come to career services only when they're in need, or when they think they need to apply for an internship or a job or those kind of things. But in reality, the sooner that we get, a face to our department at career services, students to get to know who we are and what services we provide for them,
mhm.
the better.
And speaking of services, maybe we should talk a little bit more, just so students are aware, because there are some courses that do kind of force students with assignments to reach out to our
Hmm.
office and departments and different events and activities throughout campus, really. But this one student I saw because of a Bellini certification was like, wow, I didn't know all this was here and available. It's free. Like you said, just coaching, just support, encouragement.
Yeah.
That can be a facet of this. You may have a stellar resume already.
Hmm.
You may already have done an internship, but there's so much more. So maybe if you want to think about, like, highlight some of those resources that.
And yeah, I think, well, are we referring to like the GEB, the courses, or
I would say more as a career counselor
ah,
within the Kate Tiedemann School of Business and
yeah.
Finance, like, what are our, what do you call, pillars, in a sense, like what's our bread and butter for students that they know they can come to, but then also we'll talk about ancillary.
Yeah, I mean, we have those typicals, right? So we're
Right.
talking about resume building, we're
Right.
talking about networking skills, interviewing skills, right? I think one of the biggest ones that I find is that transferable skills aspect, that I think a lot of
Yeah.
students don't necessarily connect those two dots, right? Or bridge that gap. Also, what you're learning in the classroom, and how does that relate to also work experience,
Yeah.
or how do you translate some of the skills that you're learning in that classroom, whether it's critical thinking, right, in that classroom, whether you're in a group environment and you're having to do teamwork. How does that translate? How do you can help them bridge that gap so that they understand that the purpose of that class is not just I'm learning about biology, or I'm learning about, so and so. But some of the things that you're doing is building some of those skill sets that are going to help you in your
Hmm.
career, right?
Okay.
So I think that's another aspect that a lot of students don't
That's a
get to
huge
know.
one because a lot of times I'll see on a resume students will list their classes. And I was like, yeah, you know, every student that's a finance major will take pretty similar
Yeah,
courses, whether it's USF,
yeah,
UF, FIU, wherever it might be. What did you learn in those
yeah,
classes? How do we demonstrate those skills
yeah,
on your resume through a group project, maybe?
right.
So we really do want to see students
Hmm.
bring in a resume and let us help enhance that. And for me, when I see resumes, it's almost the first step in this process. And if we catch them, as we've said,
Hmm.
early, we want to see you soon, that we can see gaps maybe
Yeah,
to where, hey, what are we going to say, Ashley? Get involved, right? That's one of
Get
our
involved.
get
Get involved.
involved.
Get involved.
yeah.
Get involved.
I was just at the resource fair yesterday, right? And in the breakout rooms, I spoke to the students.
This is for
Really
orientation.
important
He's
for
talking about
orientation.
orientation. So,
And it's so important for the students to understand what it means to be involved and that experience, right? So if a student gets involved with the club, it becomes an executive board. What are some of those skills that you developed
right.
that you can write about and as part of your resume? Because those are skills, right? I think a lot of the students associate having to put something in a resume that has to do with either they got paid for something or it was in a legit actual job, right? But there's so many different skills that or things that you can add in a resume that show off the skills that you've built, right? That
Hmm.
show off the work that you do and what you bring to the table, right? If that makes any sense.
Hmm. Yeah.
And I think it's important, we say get involved, but it's also important to balance this, not just getting involved
Mm.
for the sake of joining an organization to put it
Hmm.
on your resume, right? Again, coming back to what you're talking about, it's kind of like you get involved because it's allowing you to build some of those transferable skills that you
Hmm.
can take somewhere else, right? But then we also see, and I always caution students with this, the counter side of this, where we have students who are very involved,
Hmm.
right?
Hmm.
And so I think
See that.
also, depending on what side of the spectrum you fall, if you're someone who is not involved with student organizations, we encourage you to get involved with organizations. And if you're very involved, you might have to ask yourself, okay, how many of these organizations am I doing well, right? Or am I just involved with a whole bunch of things, but maybe I'm really only putting my energy to two things? And so how do we say, I call it, how much water can you carry, right? How much can you actually carry? And then when can you say no?
Yeah, I think it's being purposeful, right?
Yes.
Purposeful about the work that you do, um, and
You
always
stole
talking
your
to
line.
students about what are they gaining from that, right? What's the purpose of why they're doing that, and how can they utilize that what they're learning, what they're doing for their future, and apply that, right? I think that's really important, rather than just doing things because you think it's going to look good for you or it's going to make you a busybody kind of person, really being purposeful. So I agree with you. I think there's the dynamic. Nothing wrong with some students who really want to get involved and really want to be that kind of person. Absolutely. If you can do that, that's you and that's your personality. That's
Hmm.
brilliant, right? And then we can talk a lot about those strengths and say, oh, maybe that person is just that, that woo person, that person that's the achiever, that go-getter that really wants to be out there, right? So fantastic. And if you're not, if you want to be more purposeful, it's the same thing when we talk about maybe mentorship, right? Or finding that mentor, really thinking about who is in your life, right? Who is around you and do they serve a purpose for you, right? Rather than just having an array of all these people, which is fantastic, great. Um, but really being more purposeful about those connections when we talk about networking as well, right?
Yeah. We
Go ahead.
we talk a lot about mentorship on this show, and I'm curious as we have you on here, what does mentorship mean to you? And for students who are thinking about seeking a mentor or being a mentee, what are to you some of the things that they should be thinking about?
I think that in my experience, I don't think that if I recollect back, I know we talked a little bit about being a first generation college student and my journey. If it wasn't for those key important people that I had met and were in my life through that period, maybe I wouldn't have been able to be as successful or be where I am right today. That's not to say that I don't think that I had the perseverance or resiliency to do it, but having a mentor or having someone that supports you and can guide you, some guidance, some coaching, makes that process so much easier and much more smoother, right? I think our students is really being purposeful, right? I go back to that about who can you connect with,
Mm-hmm.
right? Thinking about your future, right? Where do you want to be? Who's going to get you to that point? Building those relationships with those individuals, whether it's your faculty, right? Whether it's your instructors, coaches, right? Counselors,
Mm-hmm.
career counselors, your advisors, another important one. Really start early in reaching out to them, get to know them, right? Put your face out there. For me, in terms of what it means for me, I think that it's so crucial in all the work that we do. It's an element that not a lot of us are comfortable with, right? Some of us are more introverted or not so extroverted, right? And some of us have to feel
And
like,
it's scary. It's a little
yeah, you have
intimidating
to meet
to
someone, you have to
reach
put
out.
yourself out there and
Right,
say,
right.
it can be a very vulnerable situation,
Lord,
right?
yeah.
Where you are admitting that you might need some support. And that to me is a strength, right? So if you do that, you're going to be much more successful. You can get through that, and there's going to be there to support you. So being purposeful, don't think that just because you're making that connection with that individual, that it has to be, for forever, right? I think,
That's a good point.
I think it's important to know that people come into your life for different purposes, and they are there maybe for the long run or not the long run, right? And that's okay, right? So having that understanding and say, okay, this person is great, they can help me with this. And I know this may come across a little bit selfish, but I don't think there's nothing selfish about wanting to better yourself, wanting to
No.
invest in yourself,
Yeah,
right?
absolutely.
So I think that just going through that process, and yeah.
I want to stress a few things that you mentioned about those connections, right?
Yeah.
And reaching out. A lot of times students, faculty may be intimidating
Yeah.
as well, or there are assumptions being made that they don't have time, or a lot of times students do have to get to another class or this or that. But sometimes just taking a minute to introduce, or just say, hey, this content, just start a conversation, or Google your professor and find out what they research and what they like, and strike up a conversation about that. If you're looking for scholarships at USF, you must have a faculty recommendation. And so you really do need to make some connections. And once you do that first, take that step and risk, then it gets easier, right?
Yeah.
But making those connections, your academic advisor, and us as career counselors, reaching out and just getting someone in your corner.
Yeah.
I found sometimes in advising or career sessions that just being that positive, encouraging, motivational person to say, I think that's an awesome idea. Go for it. I mean, this is your time to explore, take risks, take chances.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't like the word fail. Maybe there's a misstep. Maybe you get off track, but this is the time to do it.
Yeah, absolutely.
And you will always learn and grow from it. So
yeah. Oh no, go ahead.
Okay.
Well,
We're so excited.
So
Let's all-
two things I
Yes.
wanted to know as you were saying that. So one, I think we need to change our mindset around failure. So I hear you. You're like, I don't want to say the
like
word
to say
fail,
it. Yeah.
but it's okay to fail,
It
right?
is.
We learn from failure.
We don't teach
Failure
that, though.
is a good thing. Yeah, and that's why you're in school, you're in a university setting. I told my students this last night. Like, now is the time to make mistakes, because this is the lowest risk place that you are going to be able to make those mistakes.
True, very true.
So don't be afraid to make those. But the other thing, Jill, I think you're addressing as you're talking about this is, I think, so you've talked about mentorship, but I think there's a difference between mentorship and championing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And both play, I think, a very vital role. And so having a mentor, right, somebody who has characteristics, who is guiding you through this process, who has this record of being successful, and a champion who's going to stand in your corner and, be your hype person, right? And, being the person who's going to recommend you for awards and things like that. And so both of those people play important figures. And I think they can be the same person. I think it's also important to know, like, those could be two different people.
Oh, yeah. And I was thinking of it more in the sense of connections with campus and making sure, because we still have tons of first generation students. Were you? No, your mom. Yeah, that's right.
Your mom was.
Your mom's a teacher. So, but I was, and Andres and many other on our campus, all our faculty and staff. And when you don't have the knowledge to even when you're applying for financial aid and you don't know what to do about scholarships and you're not sure if this is the right major or career field, like connecting with someone on campus, we're your easiest ally to connect with. And then from there, I think it's important to have industry mentors, someone in a field that you're interested in that can help you. Anyway, what were you going to?
No, I was going to add, so building that relationship with the students, I think it works both ways. When you mentioned a little bit with the faculty, right, for example, that being intimidated, right? But I think it works both ways, right? So from that perspective, for the faculty to really think about, yes, I understand that their point of, because I've been in faculty roles, I understand that the role really is to teach a student the subject material. But as a faculty member, as an instructor, how am I also making that connection with the student to make them feel like comfortable to come to me? Because we, as faculty individuals, we want to talk to the students. We want the students to come to our office hours. But there was a study that was done about first generation college students. They don't even know what office hours mean, right? So if you're not, they think that you're just at your office by yourself, that you're not, it doesn't mean that your office is open.
You're working.
Right?
These are my office hours.
So how does they
it's
make
not open.
that connection so that the students feel like, okay, so I can go there. I can feel safe there, right? So whether that's maybe, I used to take my students to my actual office and say, okay, we're going to give you a little tour. This is where my office is. Come by anytime, right? So they knew and they felt like, oh, okay, this is a safe space for me to come by, right?
Yes.
Same thing with, different offices, right? We talk about career services. We want to be, that kind of business kind of forefront and kind of that look. And we want them to come to us, in that perspective, right? But at the same time, these students are not necessarily have created or developed those skills of presenting themselves in that manner, right?
True.
So here we are trying to talk to first year students, right? And we're trying to be all business-like and, welcome, so, handshake, whatever that might look like. And these students have not necessarily developed those skills to give that back to us, right?
Right.
So we also want to come across in a sense that we're here, we get you, we want to be with you, we're at your level as well, and we want to get you, mentor you, champion you to the level of where we want you to be, where we see the potential that you can be.
Exactly.
Right? So I feel like it works both ways on how we're interacting with the students so that they can also feel like they can interact with us as well. So that means getting out of the office, getting your face out there, right? Going to different events, which we do, but making sure that we're making those connections with the students, right?
All right. So I'm curious, we do emphasize internships with the podcast. And what's your take? Why are internships important? Why should students think about that in their career journey?
Well, most employers want you to have an internship. I think that's pretty much across the board, right? So that's important. But it's really just important to get experience, right? I think it's interesting because you look at all the, not all of them, but a large percentage of jobs, and they say you must have some type of experience.
1 to 2 years, 2 to 5, right?
Yeah,
and you're
like, wait, I just graduated. How did I get this experience, right? And so that's where the internship skills come along, right? So that's really important to make sure that you're getting an internship. Whenever is most available for you or most possible for you and your journey in college, really start thinking about that as early as possible. And what is that going to look like? And take any opportunities, right? Sometimes I think we want students to do paid internships. We obviously want you to get paid and all those kind of things. I know there's a process for unpaid internships, and that's perfectly fine. I think that it's really important, and I go back to that being purposeful and really thinking about the experience that you're gaining. And don't discount any little opportunity that might come your way, even if it doesn't feel like it's the biggest thing in the world for you or really what you wanted to do, but really focus on those skills that you're gaining from that experience that you can apply later on, right? So it's just so important to really start thinking about that internship really early, really start thinking about those experiences that are going to apply to what you want to do ultimately. And even if it's not necessarily, like I said, if it's not an internship necessarily in what you wanted to do, but how can you apply those transferable skills to what you're going to do, right? So
I think that's where I try to push students a little bit
Yeah.
and say, volunteer.
Yeah.
Get a summer job.
Absolutely.
It doesn't matter if you're doing any kind of game day preparations for the Bucks, the Rowdies, the Rays. You've got a foot in the door now with this professional organization. And where do you think that might take you later? You're going to see people, C-level executives, other executives that can help you when they see your work ethic. We've had several really nice success stories when those students are showing up early on time. When you go above and beyond, you're greeting your clients, your customer service skills are really shining, and they see that energy and enthusiasm. They're like, hey, this person's really moving.
Yeah.
And I've seen that happen too with other jobs like Target and Publix, where students are doing basic jobs with the company or organization. But again, their personality, their skills are really highlighted and they're promoted. And they all have corporate offices. So in the business world, it really can transition into something bigger.
Yeah, I love that you brought up the volunteer aspect of that because, or volunteering in general. So I volunteer for the city of St. Pete as president of my neighborhood association, which is completely voluntary. And I'm part of the Council of Neighborhood Associations for the city of St. Pete. I serve as the public safety chair. And I do a bunch of other little things, right? Students, I think it's really important for students to understand the value of what it means to volunteer. And because I think a lot of students think of it as, oh, I'm just going to use all this time and I'm not getting paid for it, or ugh, what am I doing,
Yeah.
But really the value of volunteering, that experience, and also how much you connect with different people.
Yes.
And it's so great. I mean, I've had so many different connections with people in the city of St. Pete just by being part of that.
And you would never
even
otherwise.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And no, I'm not getting paid for it. But there's so many things of it that I appreciate, that I'm gaining experience, that I'm gaining connections
Yeah.
that I wouldn't have had before. So I think that's a really, really important point as well.
I would say, I've volunteered for a variety of organizations, and each one is very different. And sometimes they stick, and others, it's an ebb and a flow. But again, the people that you meet, what they might do, and their journeys,
and that's a reference for you right there.
Oh, that's true.
Absolutely,
true. Yes, those
right?
count as great references.
So,
and that experience and exposure, you might run into a company that volunteers or supports that same organization. And so, boom, you've made a connection, which is kind of cool. Or it's just a hobby, passion of yours.
Yeah.
And again, a good way to connect and fit within a corporate culture sometimes. But I always think, I feel like I get a lot more than sometimes what I even give when I'm working with, whether it's kids, animals, whatever that might be, other volunteers. Usually it's happy. There are some circumstances. I've done other things with hospice and other where there's, different life stages and pieces of that. But still, most people are so grateful and thankful, and it's so rewarding. And it can sometimes put a different lens and take you away from some stress and anxiety that's happening with school or with midterms or whatever it might be. So keep in mind there's that piece too.
Yeah. I mean, it's
so many facets.
There's so many different facets. and I think as a society in the United States here, it's we have that me mentality.
Yeah.
And that we start, which is interesting because when you think about it, when you're, in elementary school, kind of middle school, you see a lot of that community volunteering programs that they do a lot of the times. As you get older and you got into like middle school, late middle school, high school, there's some components of that community service, but they start to lose it. I don't know if that's just me, but you start to lose it. It becomes more of like that me mentality, right?
Yeah.
And so I think it's really important that we continue that and we understand the value of being community minded and what does that mean, because there's so much to gain from that instead of just thinking about it from, my perspective or me.
Yeah. So true. So I think our last question for you, as you look back and reflect on your own journey, your own experiences, one of the things that's important to us is leadership and leadership development. How do you feel that you have developed as a leader, and what resources do you think have been vital to your personal and leader development?
Yeah, so I think so my next step really in my educational career and also career is getting my PhD. That's really where my next step is. And so, which I already started that process. And for me is really important that I continue to educate myself, stay current with what's going on, in whatever role I might be doing. Whether it's being part of some type of association, right? Going to conferences,
Mhm.
reading, staying up to date on what's going on, even if it's just for fun or if it's not for fun, if it's just kind of thinking about myself and thinking about that purpose or so that for me is important. So I always make sure that I stay up to current what's going on, educate myself, because the last thing that I want is to feel like I am just stagnant and I'm just the same and I'm not progressing in terms of my career or in terms of my professional development, right? So that's typically what I do. But my next step is really just getting my PhD, continue some of that work and do some more research and see how that goes.
Love it.
Alright.
And I want to end on one thing. So I asked you leadership as far as
Yeah.
you, but what does leadership mean to you?
What does leadership means to me? I think as someone I've been in various leadership roles, and I always feel it's I've always felt weird about it. Even right now, as I'm president of the neighborhood association, I do all these different things, and everyone looks at to me as the person who leads, and I always feel like I'm not, right. And it's really interesting because to me, leadership is not about you. It's not about what you making decisions. It's not about you having
This
the
power and
know-it-all, this
authority.
power of authority. No, leadership for me is how do you get others, united? How do
On
you
board.
build connections,
Yeah.
right, with others and get people to, be on board with you,
Yeah.
right? To feel that sense of empowerment, to feel that sense of like, oh, we can do it too. I
Mm.
can do it too, right?
Yeah.
Because it's not for me to be, that dictator or whatever that might be and say, hey, I'm full power. No, I would never want to be that. So if I'm leading others, if I'm in a role of leadership, I'm thinking of it as a union together. Like, how are we, growing together? How are we going to get through this, right? And I want you to feel involved. I want you to feel that sense of belonging. I want you to contribute because it's a joint effort. It's not just me.
Oh, that's a
Yeah.
great way. Before we do our final, how should students, how can
Oh,
students reach you? What should they do? How do
Yeah.
they come meet you?
Yeah, if they want to make an appointment with me, you can use Handshake. You can
Okay.
make an appointment with me. There's a variety of different options and services. You can also email me if you need to email me, andresintron@usf.edu. You can reach me on LinkedIn if you want to reach me on LinkedIn with my name. Other than that, I think that's pretty much.
Or stop by
Or you can
LPH.
stop by LPH 117.
That's right. You can stop in
Absolutely. Lynn
anytime. We'll
Pippinger
help you
Hall.
make an appointment if you need, whatever.
Anytime.
All right.
Anytime. Walk-ins are welcome.
Awesome.
Love it. Thanks everyone for tuning in to another episode of Getting Down to Business. Special shout out to our folks at Innovative Ed for helping make this episode possible.